Part 67. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 661. Song Zheng held him down, frowned and said, "Haven't you been fined enough? Because of your fight, County Magistrate Tang came to the door twice. The last time Ji Hao fought with Ying Wenhai in Chunfeng building, Pei Yun was also there. He and Ying Wenhai were cousins, and they fought against each other, almost smashing the Chunfeng building, and that's why the Yamen servants were provoked." Song Zheng said, "Be honest, be careful that your family locks you up in the government school again, and it depends on what you will do then. I won't help you bring things in from outside." Ji Hao was not convinced. "I was scratched for nothing? Obviously they designed me." Now even Wei Ting is not very convinced. Song Zheng frowned and said, "The future is long, and it's not too late for a gentleman to take revenge for 10 years. What are you in a hurry for?" Ji Hao restrained himself reluctantly. He stared at his enemy, but had no time to think about finding Man Bao and the others. But after all, Man Bao still didn't have time to come to the school every day, probably because the temperature was hot and cold, and there were so many people who were sick recently. Dr. Ji began to open a table for Man Baodan, and asked her to see a doctor and prescribe prescriptions. After receiving guests in person, many problems can be discovered, so Man Bao has been very busy recently, and this busy time means that he doesn't have much time to come to the government to study. Occasionally come here, because Bai Shan is there, and I can always avoid someone who has forgotten her. After August, and into September, which is a crisp autumn, there is less rain and fog, so fewer people get sick." Dr. Ji felt that Man Bao was too tired recently, so he decided to let her rest for a few days. "Chongyang will be in a few days. Do you want to go climbing?" "Go, our husband and the gentlemen of Daji Academy have made an appointment to climb together, and we will follow when the time comes." Dr. Ji laughed. "Climbing the mountain is very tiring, and you are disciples, so you might as well go back and rest for 2 days so that you can recharge your spirits and go up the mountain." Man Bao naturally had no opinion at all. She decided to talk to her husband about sleeping in tomorrow when she went back in the afternoon. Man Bao put his back on his back, turned around and waved goodbye to Dr. Ji, and was about to go out when a fast horse neighed and stopped at the door, and a man staggered in from the outside, knocking Man Bao away directly. Dr. Benji left. Man Bao held onto the door and rubbed his arm in pain. "You are Dr. Ji?" Dr. Ji only had time to nod his head and said, "I am." The person who came grabbed him and walked out, shouting, "My young master fell off his horse and was scratched by a tree branch to his stomach, bleeding profusely. Go and save him." Wait a minute, I need the medicine box." Dr. G's medicine boy has already come out quickly with the medicine box in his arms, and Man Bao only had time to see the man quickly bring Dr. G to the horse, grab the medicine box and run away. The drug boy followed closely for 2 steps and found that he couldn't keep up, so he stomped his feet angrily. "Whose family is this? No matter how urgent you are, you can't be in a hurry, you have to tell me where to see a doctor." Man Bao rubbed his arms and stepped forward, riding fast horses. They look like they came from Kangxiu Street. Yao Tong lowered his head and thought about it, and after a while, he smiled and stroked his palms. "I remembered, he said he fell off a horse. It should be in Kixia Mountain, and only Kixia Mountain can run horses in Kangxiu Street." Man Bao stared slightly, remembering that Bai Shan seemed to have said yesterday that their husband would take them to climb Kixia Mountain today, which was an activity for Class A and Class 3, and then they would be on vacation. Man Bao was a little uneasy, and immediately went out and said, "I'm going home." After finishing speaking, he trotted home with a basket on his back. Man Bao ran all the way back to the small courtyard, only then remembered that it was impossible for Bai Shan to go home before he finished school at the government school. She was quiet for a while, and opened the door to go in. Zhou Lang and Zhou Lejun just came back from selling seeds in the countryside. They were quite tanned, and they were sitting at the table eating noodles. The cook saw Man Bao and asked with a smile, "Miss Man, would you like a bowl of noodles?" Man Bao shook his head and asked Jojo Lang, "Fourth brother, are you full?" Jojo Lang glanced at the half bowl of noodles in front of him, and asked while eating, "What's wrong?" "Send me to Kixia Mountain, Shanbao is there, but something happened to Kixia Mountain." Jojo Lang hurriedly stuffed 2 more mouthfuls of noodles into his mouth, stood up and asked, "Then do you want to go to Mr. Zhuang? What happened to him, didn't Daji follow him?" "I don't know either, but someone came to the pharmacy to find DRG, saying that someone fell off a horse. I want to go and have a look." Aunt Rong let out an oops, but also became worried, and said, "The young master is very naughty, don't be him." She immediately went into the kitchen to pack some snacks for Jojo Lang, and said, "Go, go, if you're hungry, eat on the way." Jojo Lang took it and stuffed it into his arms, and had already pulled the horse to harness the cart. Zhou Lejun hurriedly ate 2 mouthfuls of noodles, and followed him. "Sister-in-law, I will go find it with you." Man Bao was sitting in the carriage, clutching the pannier tightly, and whispered, "Maybe I'm thinking too much, he's fine." Thursday Lang hit the air with a whip, causing the horse to speed up. At the foot of Kixia Mountain, the 3 of them stood by the side of the road and looked at each other. "Where can I run horses here? Are they on the mountain?" Jojo Lang looked around and said, "You guys wait here, I'll go find out." Just as I was about to ask a local man who looked quite old, a horse came turning from the road ahead, and the man on the horse speeded up while waving and shouting, "Get up, get up, get up." Jojo Lang hurriedly jumped back to dodge, while Man Bao looked up, and saw the drug boy sitting behind who was screaming, and couldn't help shouting, "Brother Xiao Yuan." The drug boy turned his head and saw Man Bao, his eyes lit up, and he immediately shouted, "Here, here, don't run away, the little doctor that Dr. G said is right here." The horse, which had run away for a long way, ran back again. The man on the horse glanced at the 3 of Jojo Lang, and immediately pushed Yao Tong down, reaching out to grab Jojo Lang. Jojo Lang jumped back and didn't let him catch it. The drug boy raised his head in embarrassment and said, "Oh, it's not him, it's her, Miss Man, Dr. G is calling for your help, Mr. G's bleeding can't stop, it's very dangerous, Dr. G asked you to try acupuncture and moxibustion. Give it a try." Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief. "The injured person's surname is G." Yes, yes, it's the young master of the G family, Miss Man, let's go, time waits for no one." The person on the horse immediately jumped down and bowed to ask Man Bao to save his life. Although he was very suspicious, seeing that the respect on Yao Tong's face did not seem to be fake, and she was still accompanied by Jojo Lang, he did not dare to arrest her. "Get on the horse." Man Bao then climbed into the carriage, and dragged the drug boy onto the carriage. "Let's go." Jojo Lang was driving, and Man Bao secretly glanced at the people outside in the car, and asked Yao Tong in a low voice, "Brother Xiao Yuan, why are you so fast?" "I just arrived, and I only had time to take a look at the patient before being sent by Dr. G to find someone." Xiao Yuan also took a look outside, and whispered to Man Bao, "Dr. G said, when you get there, just say give it a try, don't talk too much, Mr. G was hurt too badly, we went too late, now we can only resign ourselves to fate." Man Bao was stunned for a moment, he didn't expect it to be so serious, and asked, "He won't be called Ji how?" "I don't know what it's called, anyway, it's the young master of the Ji family, and even the imperial doctor from Yazhu Palace has come. I wish the book friend Tong Bao of the Lang family a happy birthday, more and more beautiful. Good night." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 662. The carriage ran along the road for about half a quarter of an hour and stopped for a while, and the servant who rode the horse and walked aside immediately shouted, "Come in directly, hurry up." Man Bao looked out, only to find that this is a hillside with relatively gentle ups and downs, and there are grasslands at a glance. Now there are a few horses scattered on the grassland, and a big tent not far away surrounds many people. People. The carriage passed directly towards the big tent, and the people outside saw another carriage coming, so they immediately got out of the way. Only when Lang stopped the carriage on Thursday, Yao Boy jumped out of the carriage, turned around and picked up Man Bao. "Miss Man, hurry up." He was used to doing this kind of first aid and knew how to save time, but it was the first time for Man Bao and Jojo Lang to jump out of the car after handing over the basket, and quickly entered the tent under the watchful eyes of the crowd. There was a lot of crying in the tent, and there were constant people coming and going. As soon as Man Bao rushed in, she smelled a strong smell of blood. She quickly looked at the crowd in the middle, and before she had time to go forward, a pair of hands appeared next to her. Grabbing her hand, Yao Tong didn't grab her for a moment. Man Bao looked back, and saw Bai Shan Zheng looking at her covered in blood. Man Bao was startled. "Where did you bleed?" Bai Shan asked at the same time, "Why did you come here?" He quickly glanced at the medicine boy next to him and recognized him. He also went to Jishatang to look for Man Bao. He knew both Dr. Ji and Yao Boy. Seeing him coming in with Man Bao, he guessed that she was Dr. Ji called. Bai Shan pondered for a moment and then said quickly, "I'm not injured, it's not my blood, it's Ji Hao who was injured. He fell off his horse, got caught in his feet, and a branch cut his abdomen. I listened to them, it means they can't stop the bleeding, you." Bai Shan leaned close to her ear and lowered his voice extremely low, "Don't say anything, just do your best. Remember, this matter is complicated, you must not stand out, keep a low profile and keep a low profile." Man Bao understood, nodded at him, and went forward with Yao Tong. The drug boy grabbed Man Bao, pushed the man away and stepped forward. "Sir, Miss Man is here." Man Bao pushed aside the people in front of him to see Ji Hao lying on the couch. He was covered in blood, with intestines protruding from his abdomen, his eyes were dimly opened, and even his hands and feet were placed on the couch unnaturally. But at this time, the doctors around him were not in the mood to deal with these, but were trying their best to stop the bleeding, pressing, acupuncture, and applying medicine. They thought of all the methods they could think of. Although the bleeding speed was slowed down, he's still bleeding. The imperial doctor of the Yizhu Palace didn't raise his head, and directly ordered other doctors to help him find the remaining bleeding point, find it out and stop it. If you lose blood, the gods won't be able to save it. He was pinching the biggest bleeding point in his hand, and he couldn't free his hand at all, so he could only point them aside. Of course the doctors who were arrested knew about it, but they had already touched all the places they could touch, but they really couldn't find where the bleeding was. Seeing that the abdominal cavity that had just been emptied was almost filled with blood again, the sweat on the foreheads of the doctors was about to fall, but before it could fall off, it was wiped off by the girl guarding the side. When the two women sitting paralyzed not far away heard the imperial doctor's conclusion, they couldn't help crying, "My son! My heart, you are poaching my heart." It was at this time that Man Bao was pushed to Drg's side by the drug boy. Dr. G was right beside Dr. Fan, so Dr. Fan raised his head and saw that a little girl had sneaked in, so he frowned and was about to speak when Dr. G said to Man Bao, "Go clean your hands, get your needle bag, quick." Physician Fan took back his words. The girl who was constantly replacing the water for them cleverly brought up a basin of hot water. Man Bao rolled up his sleeves and fixed them, quickly washed his hands and dried them, and then stood on tiptoe to see Ji Hao's situation. There's no way, Ji Hao's stomach is surrounded by 4 doctors and 2 drug boys, and he can't stand anymore. Dr. Ji directly said to a medicine boy, "Go out," and another doctor said, "Get out of the way." This is a critical time, and in front of the patient's family members, no one asks who is this person, and is his medical skill reliable. Anger and All the doctors took a look at Ji Hao, whose breath was gradually weakening, including Dr. Fan. They didn't have much hope to save him. "I'm just doing my best to obey the destiny." Man Bao squeezed in and got a place, and Xiao Yuan quickly brought Man Bao's needle bag. Dr. Ji also pinched a bleeding spot in his hand, and introduced it to Man Bao. They found 3 bleeding spots and pinched them all, but there was one more spot that couldn't be found. Dr. Ji said, "Look at it, can acupuncture be used to stop the bleeding?" Man Bao reached out and touched his stomach, and after a while he withdrew the needle. Dr. Fan and the other 2 doctors watched her administer the needle. When she got the 4th needle, Dr. Fan couldn't help but smile. Leng. But after a while, Dr. Chen, who was standing on the other side, couldn't help but said, "The bleeding has decreased." The position where he stands has the best view, and he can see the most clearly every time the blood volume increases. After a while, his eyes lit up and he shouted, "Stop it." Man Bao took a look at the position of the needle that just fell, and whispered to Dr. Ji, "It's under the liver." Physician Fan, who was standing close to Dr. Ji, couldn't help but glanced at Man Bao, and asked, "Can you temporarily seal the bleeding spot on my hand? I'll sew it up immediately." Dr. Ji's face paled, and he said hastily, "Master Fan, this child is still young, why don't you let me come? The bleeding point on Fan Yuyi's hand is the biggest. Once it is released, it will be like a collapse of blood. If it is not sealed, there is no need to save people, but if it is sealed, if the blood supply is insufficient, there will be various problems. Man Bao is still young, it is impossible for Dr. Ji to let her take such a risk." Physician Fan smiled at Dr. Ji, "Don't worry, Brother Ji, I will cooperate with her, and I think her method of acupuncture and moxibustion to stop bleeding is better than ours." Man Bao took a closer look at the position where he pinched. She also tried this bleeding point on an anthropomorphic model. Recalling the trend of the best hemostasis points summarized in the past, she nodded, "Okay, but you sew it up, the speed must be fast. If it exceeds 30 breaths, I will let go of the acupoints." This is also the longest time limit for feedback from the anthropomorphic model. Once exceeded, the organs will be greatly damaged. Physician Fan nodded slightly, turned his head to look at his hands, prepare the needle and thread. He used the best catgut, and immediately cleaned his hands and waited for the needle. Everything was ready. Imperial Physician Fan nodded slightly at Man Bao, and Man Bao took out the needle to quickly seal the blood in that spot. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 663. Physician Fan let go slowly, and found that only a small amount of blood flowed out, and the blood flow disappeared after a while, so he quickly took the needle and thread, and began to sew up quickly. Man Bao kept on tiptoe and stared at it with piercing eyes. Before he tied the knot and asked to cut it with scissors, Man Bao had already started to pull out the needle quickly. The organs that had been discolored due to blood loss slowly turned rosy again. Everyone stared nervously, only to find that there was only slight blood oozing out, and they were slightly relieved. Everyone lifted their spirits and looked at Ji Hao's face. Dr. Fan felt for his pulse and nodded to the other doctors, "Let's try again." Dr. Ji also breathed a sigh of relief, and the guarding girl immediately took a towel and went up to him to wipe his sweat. Seeing that Man Bao's forehead was also covered with sweat, she thought about it and took out a handkerchief from her bosom. The sun came, and carefully wiped her sweat. Man Bao turned his head and gave her a sweet smile, lowered his head and continued to touch Ji Hao's acupuncture points, and gave the needle after thinking about it. With the cooperation of Man Bao, Dr. Fan sewed up the 3 bleeding points that had been found, and then went to search for the bleeding point under the liver that Man Bao said. The girl guarding at the side didn't dare to look down at all, but only focused on the faces of the 4 doctors and Man Bao, and wiped off any sweat. Man Bao stared at it with wide eyes. It was the first time she saw a living person open his abdomen and sew it up inside. After all, she has only seen the stomach of an anthropomorphic model before. Although the simulation is very similar and has everything that should be there, it is not a real person, is it? Not only was it the first time seeing Man Bao, but it was also the first time seeing Dr. Ding, who was standing opposite, so his face was a little pale. Only Drg and Dr. Chen were well informed and could keep their expressions on. Physician Fan flipped it over gently, and finally found the small opening under the liver, but the light was dim. He raised his head. Dr. G cooperated with him several times, immediately turned around and ordered someone to light the lamp. He directly halfway squatting down, carefully illuminate the lamp for him, but don't let the lamp pollute the patient. Physician Fan took a needle and thread and sewed it up carefully. All the bleeding spots were sewed up, and Ji Hao was still alive. Even Imperial Physician Fan couldn't help but said, "This kid is pretty strong." Dr. G handed the lamp to the medicine boy, looked at him and said, "Come on, cut what should be cut, and what should be stuffed back." The next thing has nothing to do with Man Bao, but Dr. G didn't let her go, but whispered to her, "Hand me up and watch carefully." Physician Fan turned his head to look at them again, smiled slightly, and came up after cleaning his hands again. Some internal organs are damaged, and there are fragments. These need to be cleaned up, and the fallen intestines must also be washed and put back and arranged. He was nervous before, and Dr. Ding didn't feel anything when he pinched a bleeding point, but now he felt a little uncomfortable, but he also knew that the opportunity was rare, so he stared at it with wide eyes. Imperial Physician Fan is a well-known master of trauma. If he hadn't been lame and wanted to go back to his hometown to recuperate, the Yizhu Palace would not have been accompanied by him. Physician Fan did it himself. After checking that there was no problem, he sewed up the young master's stomach with thread, and then went to see his injured leg. After touching it, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although he couldn't get the patient's response, he was sure that the leg was just broken, as long as it wasn't broken. Really broken, that life can only be spent in bed. Dr. G is better at internal medicine, so he grasped Ji Hao's pulse and began to meditate. Dr. Chen and Dr. Ding also checked Ji Hao, and the four of them got together to discuss, "I lost too much blood, it's difficult." Waiting quietly all the time, an old nun who was watching the audience quietly retreated, walked to the old lady's side and whispered in a low voice. The old lady, who was wiping her tears and crying, immediately stopped her tears, and walked forward holding the old mother's hand. Dr. Fan and others immediately saluted her. The old lady got short and was about to kneel down for them. Dr. Fan and the others were taken aback, and immediately stretched out her hand to hold her. "Don't be like this, old lady, this is trying to discourage me from waiting. Dr. Fan, among my many grandsons, this is the only one who stays by my side to fulfill his filial piety. I love him the most in my life. He is only 16 years old, and he is still young. Please save his life. Dr. Yuji, you are well known for your kindness as a doctor, you should take pity on me, an old man." Dr. G is about the same age as her, so it's not easy to tease her, so he can only say, "I will do my best. Please tell me the truth, whether my grandson can live, and what kind of life will he be able to live in the future?" Dr. G hesitated and looked at Dr. Fan. Physician Fan was silent for a while. The old lady immediately turned her head and told the old mother, "There are too many people in the tent, it will be dirty, please let them all go out for now." Bai Shan and Daji, who had been watching the fun in the corner, were also invited out, and all the servants, teachers, and classmates all retreated. Dr. G immediately patted Man Bao's hand quietly, signaling her to go out too, not to get involved. Man Bao lowered his head and wanted to leave. The old mother saw her and was about to say something when she ran out in small steps. "Grandma." In the tent, only the old mother, Ji's mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, 4 doctors, and Ji Hao who was lying on the bed unknown. Dr. Ji looked at Imperial Physician Fan, and Imperial Physician Fan felt as heavy as a mountain on his back. He thought that he would be more comfortable away from the palace, but he did not expect to be caught in such a dispute. However, although he was a little worried, he wasn't too nervous. He waited up, and then glanced at Ji Hao, who had no expression on his face, and the 2 young doctors who were standing beside him, sighed faintly, and decided to stick to it to tell the truth. Young master has lost a lot of blood. Whether he can survive for 30% depends on his body, and the remaining 70% depends on destiny. The old lady staggered a bit, and MRSG covered her mouth when she heard the words, but she still couldn't help crying. Physician Fan carefully explained his injuries to them. In fact, he was filing records for Dr. Chen and Dr. Ding. After all, they were the first to arrive at the scene and treat the wound first. He was injured too badly. The tree branch just scratched his abdomen. Fortunately, the bleeding had better be stopped, otherwise just now. Physician Fan said after a pause, what the officer said is not an excuse. Instead, tell the old lady that even if he survives, he will be physically worse than others in the future, and I am afraid that he will not be able to play horses anymore. Don't dare, the old lady wiped her tears and said, if he is naughty in the future, he doesn't need to break his leg. I will break his leg myself. After Physician Fan finished talking about the visible injuries, Dr. Ji wanted to supplement the invisible injuries and illnesses. Together, the 2 of them were telling the old lady that although Ji Hao's stomach was stitched up now, it was not certain whether Ji Hao would survive. It is destiny to live, and if they don't live, then they will try their best. Dr. Chen and Dr. Ding stood aside honestly and didn't speak. They were young and inexperienced, so they didn't dare to take the credit this time, as long as they didn't come to their door for trouble. Next update around 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 664. As soon as Man Bao got out of the tent, he swept around and went straight to Bai Shan. Bai Shan also stood aside and waited for her, and when he saw her coming, he stretched out his hand and grabbed her to go aside. Wei Ting, who was in a daze, saw her and immediately followed her. The 2 moved away from the tent. Wei Ting followed them blankly, and when they stopped, he asked her with red eyes, how is Ji Hao? Man Bao said, the bleeding has stopped, but it's not certain whether he can survive. She looked at Bai Shan, looked him up and down, and asked, you have so much blood on your body, are you really okay? Bai Shan shook his head, I'm not injured, it's all Ji Hao's blood. Only then did Wei Ting interject, didn't Dr. Fan just say that he had stopped the bleeding, why isn't he still alive? There is too much blood loss, Man Bao explained, and no one knows whether the wound will get worse. There are too many and deep wounds on his body. As long as there is inflammation in one place, he may have a fever. At that time, even if the blood it is also difficult to save life if it is replenished. Wei Ting was only 16 or 17 years old after all, Ji Hao was his good friend, and the 2 grew up together since childhood. Tears welled up when they heard this. Man Bao searched on his body, but couldn't find the handkerchief, so he said, you can wipe your tears with your sleeves, Dr. Ji is very good, and I think that Imperial Doctor is also very good, as long as he survives the first 3 days, his chances of survival will increase. It's huge. Wei Ting wiped his tears with his sleeve, and then remembered to thank you very much. After thanking her, he realized that something was wrong. He looked her up and down, dumbfounded, why are you a lady? Man Bao glanced at him contemptuously. Since he was worried about his friend, she didn't say anything despising him. She held Bai Shan, and felt limp when she relaxed, so she simply sat down on the grass. She asked curiously, how did he get hurt like that? He said again, That imperial doctor is really good, he is worthy of being an imperial doctor. I have seen Dr. G sew arms and legs for trauma patients, but I have never seen someone who sews stomachs and can sew internal organs. Bai Shan opened his mouth wide, Wei Ting stammered and asked directly, what, sewn organs? What organs? It's the spleen, intestines, and liver in people. Wei Ting shook his hands and asked, well, can I still live like this? Man Bao thought for a while and said, in theory, it is possible, but I have never sewed a real person, so I am not sure. Anyway, when she sewed anthropomorphic models, she could survive 3 or 4 times out of 10 times. Later, she survived 8 times out of 10 times. It seems that she has to step up her training recently, and it is best to survive 10 out of 10 times. I always thought that she could suture the trauma at most. After all, Teacher Mo said that the conditions here are not good. Even if the person survives the laparotomy, the aseptic treatment after the operation is still a big difficulty. So she has been committed to simulating acupuncture and Chinese patent medicine to stop bleeding, not only including internal bleeding and external bleeding. But after seeing Fan Yuyi's suturing skills today, Man Bao knew that it was possible to do so at this time. She thinks it's okay to sew and mend in people's stomachs, but Wei Ting can't help but cry, thinking that Ji Hao is really finished. Bai Shan knew a little bit about medical theory, so he managed to hold his own, and asked, do you still need to have a laparotomy in the future? Man Bao shook his head, probably not, laparotomy is very dangerous. Generally speaking, unless the abdomen is open, otherwise it will not be laparotomy. So Man Bao felt that this was also Ji Hao's luck. Although he was unlucky, but Man Bao had seen his injuries, the hemorrhage of liver and spleen was not caused by a branch cut, but because of the impact, and the branch cut his stomach. If there is no cut, and Dr. Fan and the others come, they can only stop the bleeding with medicine and acupuncture. It is impossible to open the abdomen and suture to stop the bleeding. But judging from the wounds she saw, it is very difficult to stop all the bleeding with medicine and acupuncture, even more difficult than it is now. So maybe Ji Hao should be grateful for the stroke he was scratched by the branch. At that time, people were very taboo about laparotomy. Even when a woman gave birth, it was the last step, and the mother would only open the laparotomy after the death of dystocia. Few people dared to laparotomy while the mother was still alive. But Drg told her quietly that he felt that many women with dystocia, if they open their abdomen early, take out the baby and suture them, and take care of them properly, the mothers should be able to live. It's a pity that there are very few women who study medicine in the world, and men and women are different. Even if he can open his abdomen to take a child, he would dare to open his abdomen to take a child, but there is no one who dares to let him enter the delivery room to use a knife. Wei Ting cried for a long time, and then wiped his tears to answer Man Bao's question. It was Ying Wenhai, who whipped Ji Hao's horse so hard that he fell off. As soon as the words were finished, there was a commotion from the other side of the tent. The three immediately stood up and looked over. It turned out that one of them dragged a young man to the front of the tent and asked him to kneel and plead guilty. Wei Ting's face was a little angry, and he said, "What does Ying Jia mean by this? Ji Hao's life and death are still uncertain. Is he kneeling here now? Is he trying to add fuel to the fire?" As soon as the words fell, MRSG rushed out of the tent, raised her hand and was about to hit the kneeling boy, but was grabbed by the old woman who followed closely. She hugged MRSG forcefully, and pushed back Go into the tent, and then said loudly to the standing middle-aged man, "Master Ying, my old lady said that now my young master's life or death is uncertain, and she doesn't have much energy to deal with these things for the time being. We will talk about everything after my young master wakes up. Well, as for young master Ying, you can deal with it as you like. The prince is on top, and the county magistrate is on the bottom. The Ji family believes in the laws of the country, so there is nothing to say." Standing Master Ying's face was black and blue, but she still had to squeeze out a smile to talk to the old mother, but she didn't wait for him to speak. She turned around and told the servants of Ji's family, "Go and carry the soft couch, the carriage bumpy, call a few more strong men to carry the young master back." Yes, Ji's servants filed away. Man Bao and Bai Shan saw that the smile that Mr. Ying squeezed out disappeared immediately, and then stood still with a sullen face. It was the first time for the two of them to see such a confrontation, and they were stunned for a while. Master Ying took a deep breath, kicked his kneeling son directly, kicked him out and cursed angrily, "Look at what you have done. If the young master of the Ji family has any good or bad, I will kill you, send you to Ji's house." When County Magistrate Tang arrived, he happened to see Ying Wenhai, who had been kicked away. Coincidentally, he just fell at his feet. Seeing the blood coming out of his mouth, he couldn't help frowning slightly, so he knelt down and reached out to support him, pulled him up and handed him to the Yamen servant behind him, then looked at Ying Wei. "Master Ying, Mr. Ying is still, leave it to me for the time being." Ying Wei didn't expect Tang He to come, and couldn't help shrinking his pupils when he heard his words, and quickly said, "Master Tang, this is Ying's family business, so I won't bother you." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 665. Magistrate Tang looked at MRSG, who came out behind him, and asked after bowing, "I've seen the old lady, does the old lady think the same way?" MRSG said with a cold face, "When did Ji's family and Ying's family become a family?" Ying Wei choked for a moment, he hurriedly bowed and saluted MRSG, wanting to apologize again, but MRSG gave way directly, and then turned sideways to let out the tent door. The strong men who brought the things filed in, and after a while, they carefully carried Ji Hao out. Ji Hao's clothes did not change, they were cut in a mess by scissors, and the exposed parts were all stained red with blood. At this time, he was covered with a new quilt. Dr. Fan and Dr. Ji came out, and the two of them followed from left to right, always paying attention to Ji Hao's situation. Seeing this, Ying Wei knew that Ji Hao's condition was not good, so he raised his heart slightly, and stepped aside without saying a word. The servants of Ji's family protected Ji Hao to go home first. In order to avoid accidents along the way, they had to clear the pedestrians on the road first. After all, if something accidentally falls and hits the patient on the soft couch, or someone accidentally spills a basin of water. Tang County Magistrate also sent Yamen servants to assist. Fortunately, Ji's house is not very far from Kixia Mountain, and it took about 3 or 4 quarters of an hour to carry the soft couch. As soon as the patient left, MRSG looked at County Magistrate Tang, bent slightly and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Tang." Tang County Magistrate returned the salute expressionlessly, beckoning the Yamen servant to take Ying Wenhai away. Ying Wei's face was ugly, but he didn't stop him. He was in Tang He's hands, and he could fish for it afterwards. At this time, it was not a wise choice to confront Ji's family face to face. Ying Wei no longer went to see his son, but wanted to go forward and apologize to MRSG again, but MRSG ignored her and walked towards the carriage, dragging her daughter-in-law's hand. MRSG did not have the scheming and bearing of MRSG, she turned her head and gave Ying Wei a vicious look, helped her mother-in-law into the car, and then got on. The old mama looked around in the crowd and saw Bai Shan and Man Bao standing together. She summoned a servant, whispered a few words, and then jumped onto the shaft of the car. Ying Wei sent the carriage down the mountain with a look of sincerity and fear, and glanced at the servants of Ji's family who were walking in front. He gritted his teeth and followed. The servants of Ying's family came up from behind and whispered, "Master, the car is coming, you can get in the car and follow." "Go away, let the carriage back and follow," Ying Wei said after a pause. "Send someone to the county magistrate Tang to watch over him, don't allow the people from the county government to use torture, and take good care of the young master." The servants responded. Ying Wei made a gesture of apologizing along the way, insisting on walking beside the carriage, apologizing to the old lady and the second lady in the carriage from time to time, and then ran to the front to see Ji Hao, and asked about Ji Hao's situation with concern. MRSG's complexion became more and more ugly. She lifted the curtain to look at Ying Wei's back, and closed her eyes fiercely. On the contrary, MRSGER's face softened a lot. She wiped her tears and said, "If Ying Wenhai has half the tolerance of his father, why is my son like this?" "Shut up." MRSG clenched the crutch in her hand, took a deep breath and said, "You just concentrate on taking care of Hauer in the backyard, and don't worry about the things ahead. No matter who comes from the Ying family, you don't want to see him. Don't talk either." MRSG bowed her head and said yes. Only then did MRSG press the corners of her eyes, wipe away her tears, and then told the old mother, "Clear out all the things in Hauer's yard and make room for Dr. Fan and Dr. G." After a pause, he continued, "There are also Dr. Chen and Dr. Ding. Although their medical skills are not as good as those of Dr. Fan Yu and Dr. G, they are young, so it is good to help them." "Yes." The old nanny paused and then said in a low voice, "Madam, Dr. G seems to have a very powerful female apprentice, should you invite her to help?" MRSG thought for a while and asked, "Is that the little lady who stopped Hauer from bleeding?" "Yes." "Forget it, since Dr. G didn't ask her to follow, we don't need to force others to do so. The two best doctors in Yazhu City are here." The old mother glanced at Ying Wei, who returned to their car again to offer her courtesy, and said nothing. At that time, the old lady was outside the circle of people and couldn't see the movement inside. She could only guess something by listening, but she kept staring at them condescendingly. "But now is not the time to talk, let's go back to the mansion and talk." And at this moment, County Magistrate Tang also saw Man Bao and the others standing aside. He was going to go to Ji's house with him, but when he saw them, he took another look at Ying Wenhai and the silent Ying Wenhai standing there. The servants of the Ying family who were watching covetously from the side. He was not in a hurry at all, and waved his hand to the government officials to clean up the people at the scene, and drove away all irrelevant people. He brought Ying Wenhai and the clerk to the front and asked, "Come on, tell me what happened." Ying Wenhai remained silent. The servants of the Ying family wanted to step forward to stop them, as if they didn't want Magistrate Tang to ask questions at this time. Magistrate Tang just stared at them, and they felt a chill go down their spines, and they dared not go forward anymore. Tang County Magistrate was also polite, pointing directly at the two Yamen servants and said, "Go, drive them away, stay here again, and directly arrest them for obstructing the handling of the case, and take them to the county Yamen to beat them with 20 slaps." Seeing that he was so irritable, Man Bao asked, "Master Tang, why are you so angry?" County Magistrate Tang sneered, "Can you not be too big?" This is under his command, but he didn't get the news as fast as the Yazhu Palace. He was called to the Yazhu Palace to sit for 2 cups of tea. He didn't find out about it until the dust settled in the evening. Magistrate Tang waved his hand to let the Yamen guard hold Ying Wenhai to stay on the grass, while he looked at Wei Ting and Bai Shan and asked, "You are all witnesses, right? Where did the incident happen?" Wei Ting hurriedly took him to see it, and the county magistrate Tang said dissatisfiedly, "Where do you guys get so angry? Didn't you just have a fight in the Chunfeng Tower, and you need to kill someone's life?" "We didn't harm Ying Wenhai, it was Ying Wenhai who harmed us." Magistrate Tang sneered and said, "Ji Hao's mouth, forget it, you should tell me how you two got into a fight." After finishing speaking, he glanced at Wei Ting, then skipped him and pointed at Bai Shan, saying, "You tell me." "I don't know," Bai Shan said, "this matter has nothing to do with me, and I'm not with them." Wei Ting hesitated to speak. Bai Shan directly narrated, "Mr. said that we are going to start learning riding and archery and royal lessons, so today he took us to climb the mountain and look at the horses by the way. If there is something that looks good, we will buy it." I can rent out the school's horses. By Shandao, I chose a horse, and I was walking around on it. When I heard them arguing, I hit the horse and left, keeping far away from them. Magistrate Tang /U0026 waiting, shouldn't they be going up to watch the fun? Good night. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 666. Bai Shan sighed and said, "Who knows that I heard the neighing of the horse not long after I ran out, and when I turned around, I saw Ji Hao's horse ran out like crazy, and went directly to the forest not far away. Then I saw Ji Hao bump twice on the horse, maybe he fell off the horse without grasping it firmly, but one of his feet got stuck. I subconsciously chased after him. Speaking of Ji Hao's riding skills are considered good, he turned sideways when he fell, so he didn't hit his head and neck, but dragged half of his body. Bai Shan chased after him, unloaded the carriage, and Daji, who was riding beside him to protect him, naturally followed, and Bai Shan asked him to save people. Ji Hao's horse ran far away with Ji Hao, and scratched a branch during the process. Then Daji followed, chopped off the stirrups that were covering Ji Hao's feet, and dismounted to save people. Bai Shan arrived a little earlier than Wei Ting, because he reached out to cover the wound to stop the bleeding, so he got blood all over his body. As for the matter before the horse ran out, we could only ask Wei Ting who was following Ji Hao. So Magistrate Tang looked at Wei Ting. Wei Ting said, the two of them quarreled again because of the matter of Chunfeng building. They had a horse race before, and Ying Wenhai lost. It was agreed that whoever lost would get off the horse and apologize. Who knew that he just hit Ji Hao with a whip immediately? Ji Hao was unprepared, so he fell off the horse. Magistrate Tang asked calmly, what did they say during this period? Wei Ting opened his mouth and didn't speak. Man Bao said, he won't have a beard again. Wei Ting was silent. Magistrate Tang snorted and looked at Man Bao, why are you here? Man Bao was unhappy, and said, why can't I be here? I can be of great use today. Tell me how she helped stop the bleeding. County Magistrate Tang was silent for a while and then asked, do you understand Ji Hao's injury well? It's okay. Although I didn't touch his legs, I have checked his upper body, including his head, and felt his pulse. Then tell me, what are the chances of him surviving? Wei Ting was taken aback. How could he ask such a question? Man Bao fell silent. No one had ever asked her like this before, so she was very cautious. After calculating all aspects, she said, 30%. 30%, Wei Ting almost jumped up. Didn't you say that it will be fine after 3 days? Man Bao nodded heavily and said, the chance of him surviving these 3 days is only 30%. The bleeding has stopped. Wei Ting's eyes were red again. Man Bao was silent for a while and then said, some people just got poked with their fingers, and if the injury is not treated well, they may die, and the wound on his abdomen is so big, and we have been tossing in his stomach for so long, although everything has been scalded with boiling water and salt water is used as much as possible, but germs cannot be completely killed. Wei Ting wept. Magistrate Tang looked at Man Bao curiously and asked, what are germs? It's something that can make a wound inflamed worse. County Magistrate Tang touched his chin and said, it's a good name, so what are the chances that he will survive with all his beard and tail after he survives? 70 to 80%, Man Bao thought for a while and said, the imperial doctor touched his leg and said it was just broken, not broken, but I don't know how it broke. Magistrate Tang nodded to express his understanding. He turned around and was about to leave, but stopped after thinking for a while, and said to Wei Ting, you and the clerk go back to the county government office to take notes, and then I will have someone take you home. I think you will be living in a government school tomorrow. Well, Don't go out until the case is resolved. Wei Ting knew that Magistrate Tang was doing it for his own good, so he bowed down. County Magistrate Tang saw that he was standing still, so he said, "What are you still standing for? Let's go." Wei Ting blinked, glanced at Bai Shan and Man Bao who were standing aside, said goodbye and left. When he was far away, County Magistrate Tang looked at the young girl carefully, then sighed and said, "I don't know if your luck is good or bad. How did you catch up with such a thing?" The two blinked suspiciously. Magistrate Tang said, "Do you know who Ji Hao is?" Bai Shan, a member of Class A and 3, ranked 53rd in the mid-year exam. Magistrate Tang reached out and patted him on the head, saying, "Ji Hao is the grandson of Ji Songyuan, the current prime minister, and Ji's family is also a prominent family in Yizhu. MRSG came back 3 years ago because she was unwell and homesick. Now, only Ji Hao's mother and son are accompanying her, so MRSG loves Ji Hao very much, and Ji Xiang likes him very much because of his filial son, so you two understand. What about Yingjia?" The county magistrate of Tang sighed, "Princess Yizhu is Ying Wenhai's aunt, and her mother's Pei family is a prominent family in Yuzhou. Uncle Pei Zi is the censor in Beijing." Bai Shan and Man Bao looked at him sympathetically. Seeing that they understood, Magistrate Tang no longer introduced the complicated relationship between the two families, but said, "This time, it is a good thing that you all participated in saving him. Neither the Ji family nor the Ying family will be here. Embarrassing you a little bit. Ji Hao is alive, everything is fine, but if he dies," County Magistrate Tang lowered his voice, "in the end, all witnesses and testimonies are the key to the verdict of the crime, and you will all be involved, especially you both of these appeared at the most critical time." Bai Shan and Man Bao opened their mouths wide. Magistrate Tang thought for a while and said, "If you can, you should leave Yizhu city first, or go home, or go on a study tour. I can say hello to the supervisor of the prefectural school and ask you for a long vacation." Bai Shan turned his head and looked at Man Bao, then said, "We have to go back and discuss with the husband." "I want to discuss with Mr. Zhuang," County Magistrate Tang said, "think carefully about it. I'm not worried about the Ji family, but I'm afraid that the Ying family will change their confession for you." Bai Shan and Man Bao expressed their understanding, and left after bowing and saluting their thanks. Daji followed behind to bring his own horses, harness them to the cart and take them home. Zhou Lang and Zhou Lejun had been standing by the car and waiting for a long time. When they saw them coming, they picked up the baskets in their hands to indicate that everything was packed. Man Bao and Bai Shan took the car driven by Daji together. In the car, both of them were silent. Man Bao asked, "Shall we go?" Bai Shan said, "I don't want to leave, so I'd better ask Mr. Man Bao nodded. When they returned home covered in blood, Mr. Zhuang, Bai Erlang, and the cook were all taken aback, especially Aunt Rong. She touched Bai Shan once and was relieved to make sure that he was not injured. Then she immediately said, "I have to cook some mugwort leaves and take a bath to get rid of the bad luck." "Just wait, I'll boil the water right now." Mr. Zhuang also let go of the heart he was holding, and said, "Come in." So the two of them followed into the study and narrated what happened today. Bai Erlang listened in a daze, and said, "That gentleman from the Ji family is too risky, didn't he just get raped last time, got one? Falling off the horse, I also thought of Sister Wan's fiancé, but unfortunately he didn't have Ji Hao's luck, he landed on his head." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 667. Zhou Lang also listened to it, and then slammed his mouth and said, "Then this matter has nothing to do with us, let's forget about it. Why did you look so ugly when you came back just now?" Bai Shan also said the advice of Magistrate Tang, then looked at Mr. Zhuang and asked, "Sir, what do you think we should do?" "What can we do? Of course we are going home." Zhou Lang immediately got up and said, "Sir, do you think we will leave tomorrow, or pack up and leave in 2 days? They can't afford to offend this one or both." Mr. Zhuang looked at Bai Shan and Man Bao and asked, "How about you, do you want to leave?" The two shook their heads together. Mr. Zhuang looked at Bai Erlang again, and asked, "What about you?" Bai Erlang blinked, and asked, "What does this have to do with me? If the master wants to leave, I will naturally follow. If he doesn't leave, they won't be able to find me, right?" Mr. Zhuang pointed to Man Bao and Bai Shan and said, "Anyone who has anything to do with them is involved, not to mention you are their junior. They can bribe you with money, or threaten you, or intimidate you. Anyway, there are many ways." "Yes." Bai Erlang opened his mouth wide, and then said angrily, "If this is the case, they are too hateful, I won't leave." Mr. Zhuang smiled and nodded, "Then we won't leave." Now Zhou Lang was dumbfounded. "Why, that's the Yizhu prince's mansion. If we fight with the nephew of their concubine, isn't that looking for a loss?" Mr. Zhuang smiled and comforted him, "No, this Yizhu city is not dominated by the Yizhu king's family, and it is only the nephew of Yizhu princess, not the son of Yizhu king, so don't worry." While talking, the cook boiled the wormwood water. Mr. Zhuang then drove the two of them to take a bath and change clothes, and Bai Erlang was also kicked out. Then he said to Zhou Lang, "There are many kinds of dangers in this world, some are to be avoided, and some don't need to be timid. They are still young people, how can they do without some courage?" Zhou Lang was taken aback for a while. Mr. Zhuang said with a smile, "Today he avoids people quarreling. There is no need to take such a risk, so it is right, Ji Hao is dragged by a horse. Isn't this danger more dangerous than the former? But he still beats the horse. It was right to chase after him, because one should not be timid in the face of such a danger, after all, it can save a life. Of course, there's no need to dodge the potential danger of my family," Mr. Zhuang said with a smile. "Bai Shan is still a student at the government school. If he hides at home because of this little danger, how can he be an official in the future?" Woolen cloth. "You must know that there are dangers everywhere in the officialdom," Mr. Zhuang said. "Once a person gets used to avoiding danger, he becomes cowardly." Zhou Lang was stunned for a while when he heard it. Although he didn't understand it very well, he still kept these words firmly in his heart. Not to mention Zhou Lejun standing by the door. Daji bowed deeply to Mr. Zhuang, then stepped back, and went to take a bath as well. He was also covered in blood, and even the smell of blood was heavier than that of Bai Shan. After all, Ji Hao was carried to the tent by him. To go. Mr. Zhuang waited for them all to go down, and then stroked his beard and began to think. What Tang County magistrate didn't have time to tell them was that Pei's daughter had already passed away, leaving only Ying Wenhai's son, so the Pei family loved this grandson very much. However, Mr. Zhuang gambled that the king of Yizhu did not want to offend the Ji family. Compared to the Ying family, the Ji family is very prosperous in the court. Not to mention Ji Xiang himself, there are 3 sons and 1 grandson who are all in the court. Official. Even if the official positions of the descendants are not high, the forces connected behind them are not something the Ying family can resist. In front of the Ji family, all the Ying family can rely on is the king of Yizhu. After Man Bao washed her hair and took a bath, Zhou Lejun immediately stepped forward to wipe her hair, and asked in a low voice, "Sister-in-law, then should 4th uncle and I stay at home?" Man Bao thought for a while and said, "You can do what you did before. It's not a big problem if Ji Hao is still alive. If he, cough cough, then you all go home to get souvenirs and stay at home for a while. Then what if something happens to you here?" "Nothing will happen," Man Bao said. "The Ji family is not blind and deaf, and won't let the Ying family do whatever they want." Bai Erlang asked, "Then on Chongyang festival, can we still go out and climb high?" "Go, why don't you go?" Bai Shan also came out of the wash, and said with wet hair, "I still have to go to school tomorrow, and I have to go to Kixia Mountain to buy horses, so I can do whatever I want. Dare to do anything to me? He said. Ji Hao's mouth is cheap, but his hands and feet are not cheap. Yang Wenhai's 2 shots are so cruel, Man Bao and Bai Erlang thought about it, and it was the same when they were at the government school last time. Although Ji Hao had a cheap mouth and yelled to beat them up, he didn't touch them with his hands or feet, but was pushed and kicked by them. The 3 of them sighed in unison. After all, it was someone they knew, such a fresh life. Man Bao asked Keek, is there any anti-inflammatory drug like Teacher Mo mentioned in the mall? No, Keek said, it's an antique medicine. Now everyone is injured and lies down in the treatment cabin. Whether it's medicine or other treatments, it's directly supplied through the treatment cabin. Manbao has seen the pictures and prices of the treatment chamber, because the handling fee far exceeds the current technology and is more expensive than the treatment chamber itself. She dismissed this idea, and asked instead, since the anti-inflammatory drug is an antique drug, can I find out how it is made? Keek instantly arranged more than 20 books and said, welcome to buy. Then he threw the 20-odd books into the shopping cart, searched out 2 rows of endless books, and said, this is what is needed to make medicines. I think you are thinking about cultivating safe anti-inflammatory drugs. You may have to read these books first. Man Bao counted and found that he couldn't count, so he simply gave up. Just tell me how many books there are. Not many, just 89. Man Bao glanced at the thickness of one of the books, and said in his heart, forget it, I'd better stop thinking about flying, and just crawl honestly. Although a little regretful, Keek had to say that the host's decision was correct. Medicine is developing, but it is not only medicine that develops in this world. Anything can only develop in a suitable environment, otherwise, it may be counterproductive. For example, ulcer doctors have existed since ancient times. Fan Yuyi was a famous doctor of ulcers at the beginning, and then he had the opportunity to become a master of trauma when he joined the army. Although he was dubbed the Holy Hand of Trauma, in fact, not many nobles and imperial doctors who knew his details really respected him, especially those famous doctors, who were not as respectful to him as they were to other imperial doctors. Because the status of doctors who treat trauma has always been low, Imperial physician Fan was able to become an imperial physician from an ulcer doctor because he once saved the late emperor. Otherwise, he is still working as a military doctor on the front line. In the eyes of the doctors, the treatment of wounds such as swelling, ulcers, and fractures, as well as the treatment methods that require cutting with a knife, are too rough and cause too much damage to the body. Right way. Although Dr. G is not an imperial physician, he received the same treatment as imperial physician Fan in G's family. Next update around 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 668. The 2 old doctors and Dr. Chen and Dr. Ding picked up all the clothes on Ji Hao's body, treated some minor injuries that had not been treated in time, and then put a clean cloth on his wound. Physician Fan said, this bandage must be scalded with boiling water, exposed to the hot sun, and salt water should be used to scrub the wound every time. The old mother felt distressed. It hurts so much to use salt water. Mr. Fan, do you think there is any other better way? Before Imperial Physician Fan could speak, Dr. G said indifferently, yes, replace it with the strongest beiju, the effect is no worse than salt water. The old mother immediately dared not speak. Dr. Fan turned his head and joked with Dr. G, you are not afraid of really waking up the child. It's a good thing to wake up, it's better than not to wake up. Dr. G glanced back at the bloodless Ji Hao, sighed and said, I prescribed a prescription for nourishing blood, his breath is weak now, so he has to find a way to replenish blood. As for people not waking up, there is naturally a feeding method for not waking up, this is not in the care of their doctors. In terms of internal adjustment, Dr. G was obviously better than Imperial Physician Fan, so the old lady respectfully accepted the prescription and left. The 4 doctors were also very tired. After discussing it, they decided to take turns to be on duty, with an old doctor leading a young one. Physician Fan chose Dr. Chen to follow, and Dr. Ji took Dr. Ding with him. After the appointment, they went down to wash and rest. If something happened, they would send someone to find the person on duty. But Dr. Ji, who returned to his room, was not sleepy. After eating, he hesitated and knocked on the door next door. Physician Fan opened the door for him to come in, poured him a cup of tea and sighed, "I've been crying for half an hour." It refers to the crying sound from the main room. Since he took a bath, he was still crying after eating. Dr. Ji asked, "Didn't the people from Yizhu Palace come to pick you up?" Physician Fan smiled and shook his head, "Quite accustomed to it. People like us are masters when we need it, and ordinary people without names and surnames when we don't need it." He said with a smile, "Now that young Master Ji's life or death is uncertain, the Yizhu Palace naturally avoids it as much as it can." Dr. Ji glanced at him and said, "You can think about it? I'm different from you. I'm a military doctor. I was able to enter the Thai hospital because of luck. I've experienced this kind of thing a lot. What can't you think about it?" Dr. Fan said, "I'm 54 this year. I'll wait until later. 2 years later, if the child in my family breaks out, I can report my illness and leave my job." Imperial Physician Fan paused and then smiled, "I think your Jishitang is good. I will also go to your place to be a sitting doctor to earn some extra money then." Dr. Ji smiled and said, "It's what I wish for. With you as an imperial doctor, our Jishitang's business will definitely be better." Physician Fan smiled and shook his hands, "Don't bury me. You Jishitang can still find someone with a broken bone or cut open stomach to treat me every day. It's good to have your name here." Physician Fan choked for a moment and asked, "Is that little girl your apprentice today?" Dr. Ji smiled and said nothing. Physician Fan said, "Although she is a woman, she is very talented." "Who taught her the acupuncture technique to stop bleeding?" Dr. Ji said, "Self-study." Physician Fan didn't quite believe it. "Is it a family tradition? Is it a descendant of a famous doctor in our Yizhu?" Dr. Ji just shook his head and didn't speak. Physician Fan was a little dissatisfied, pushed him and said, "What are you afraid of? I won't fight with you." Dr. Ji sighed and said, "Let's talk about it after this matter is over. When the time comes, you come to Jishitang to find me, and I'll show you that child." Physician Fan was finally reconciled, and sighed, "Her acupuncture method to stop bleeding is well used, and I don't know how many people can be saved." Dr. Ji nodded and said with a smile, "Actually, I have also learned it, but after all, I am old and lack energy, so I am not as good as her." "Fan," you said, "you haven't learned everything yet. Otherwise, I would have been groping for a needle by myself." The 2 old doctors joked with each other for a while, then Dr. Ji went back to his room and fell asleep to the sound of crying from the main room. Mrsger stood by Ji Hao's bed and cried, watching the girl feed him medicine with a reed tube. Mrsg didn't stop her from crying, she couldn't help wiping her tears. The old mother stood behind her, and whispered what she had found and the treatment at that time, and said, "The man who saved the young master is a classmate of the young master. According to Mr. Wei, his name is Bai Shan. Not from Yizhu, but from Longzhou in Guanyi Road." Longzhou, Mrsg frowned and thought for a long time before saying, "I vaguely remember that someone's family is also from Longzhou." The old mother smiled and said, "Old lady forgot, Chiao Chenchi, the old lady of Chiao's family is from Longzhou. In May, old lady Chiao's natal nephew also went to Yizhu to take up a post. You even sent someone to give you a gift." After she said this, Mrsg remembered and asked, "Are they from the same family?" "I don't know yet, but I have already sent someone to ask Mr. Fu Shui for the address. After all, he saved our young master's life." Mrsg nodded and said, Let someone send a generous gift first. When Hauer wakes up, we will have a good banquet and invite him to come and have fun." The old lady agreed. "And the little lady you mentioned, also prepare a generous gift and send it to Jishitang to find out which family she is from, and write it down. When Hauer wakes up later, please come here together." "Yes." The old lady retreated to make arrangements, so before nightfall, Bai Shan received a generous gift from Ji's family. The table was piled up with gift boxes, and the table was put on the ground when it couldn't fit. The servant who was sent to give the gift happened to be in Qixia Mountain today. When he saw Man Bao coming out of the house with Bai Shan, he was shocked, then laughed, and said, "It's a coincidence, I didn't expect the little lady to be there too. Here, we are about to send a gift to Jishitang. Since we met the young lady here, why don't the young lady tell you the address of your home, and the little ones will send the gift directly to the house, so that you won't have to go back and forth to get it." Man Bao was stunned for a while, and asked, "I am also polite." Of course, everyone who saved the young master today is polite. Only then did Man Bao nod and said, "My family lives here, you just have to get people to move things in." "Servant." He looked at Bai Shan, then at Man Bao, and said hesitantly, "The two of you are." Zhou Lang sent Mr. Zhuang out to find someone, and now the master of the family is of course the senior sister Man Bao, so she stood up and smiled, "I am his senior sister, our husband has gone out, there is no adult at home, so we are neglecting." The servant immediately bowed his head, wiped his sweat and said, where, that little one will ask someone to bring the things in." He followed and walked out. Originally, the gift to Man Bao was lighter than Bai Shan's. After all, their definition at the beginning was that Bai Shan was the young master's classmate, while Man Bao was Dr. Ji's apprentice. But at this moment, the servant thought about it, and took some out of the appeasement gifts given to the Ji family, Chen family, and Ding family on his own initiative. Then let the servants go in together. The next update will be around 8 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 669. The presents were placed in half the room, and the most of them were all kinds of fabrics. Man Bao touched them and found that they were all new to him, and the colors were very beautiful. Zhou Lejun and Bai Erlang opened the box on the ground. Zhou Lejun looked at the ink stick in his hand, then at the box of pens in Bai Erlang's hand, closed it and put it down, and went to look for other things. Then I discovered that apart from a set of pearl jewelry, my sister-in-law also had boxes of strange herbs. Zhou Lejun was dumbfounded. Why did they send medicinal materials to my sister-in-law? Bai Shan guessed, because Man Bao is a doctor. Man Bao looked at the Polygonum multiflorum in one box and the bird's nest in another box, scratched his head and said, "I can't eat these things either. Especially Polygonum multiflorum." She looked at it again and again, and found that the quality was not bad, so she said, "Send it back to Dad." Zhou Lejun said, "Sell it." The aunt and nephew looked at each other. Zhou Lejun said, "Sister-in-law, you send it back. Grandpa finally asked my father to take it to the pharmacy for money." Bai Shandao, "Put it away, it might be useful for giving gifts in the future." He also felt that the gift from Ji's family was a bit strange. Even if there were many kinds of medicinal materials, how could he give Polygonum multiflorum? But who cares, they accept gifts, so they accept whatever they give. Now all they can use are some fabrics and pens and inks. Bai Shan is very generous to share with everyone. Man Bao also only kept the pearl jewelry, and took out the rest for everyone to share. Bai Erlang and Zhou Lejun were not polite, they chose one they liked, and put the rest in their room for safekeeping. Zhou Lejun also asked, "Do you want to keep an account book? I heard that rich people have to make a book to record the gifts they receive, just like we have to record the gifts from each family when we eat wine in the countryside, and we have to pay them back later. Manbao was surprised, we still have to pay it back. Isn't this a gift to repay our life-saving grace? Bai Shan almost spit out the tea in his mouth, and said to Manbao, just know it in your heart, don't say it. The house is full of our own people, not outside. Bai Erlang thought it was troublesome, so he waved his hand and said, then don't forget, anyway, we won't have much contact with Ji's family in the future. Bai Shan nodded, Ji Hao is too good at getting into trouble, even Mr. is so tired that he wants to run outside. Let's have dinner first. My husband and fourth brother probably had a drink with someone outside, and I have to go to Jishatang tomorrow. Manbao became excited when he mentioned this, and said to them, you don't know, I have a drink with you yesterday. I saw a very powerful man, he sewed wounds very fast, I didn't understand a lot of them, I'm going to ask Dr. Ji for advice tomorrow. But Dr. Ji was not in Jishi Hall. Dr. Xiao Ji said, Father has been left at Ji's house, young Master Ji probably won't come back before he wakes up. What about the patients who come to the pharmacy to see a doctor? There are me and shopkeeper Zhen. Dr. Xiao Ji was still a little confident, but he still invited Manbao together, you can prescribe prescriptions independently, do you want to stay? Manbao rolled his eyes and asked, are there any patients who have scratched their stomachs? Dr. Xiao Ji, generally speaking, patients who have scratched their stomachs will bleed to death if they are not sent to us, and where are there so many patients who have scratched their stomachs? He endured and endured, but he couldn't help but said, don't think about the patient who has scratched his stomach, what if the Ji family hears about it? Manbao put down his back basket, took out his pen and ink and sighed, okay, I understand, come on, let's see a doctor together. Bai Shan also went to the school for classes, and the Chongyang holiday will start tomorrow. According to the plan, there should be half a day today to go to the supervisor to confirm the purchase or lease of horses, but what happened yesterday, the whole school is very quiet. A kind of calm before the storm. Except for the students in Class A and 3 who would whisper about Ji Hao's injury, no one in the other classes in the prefectural school talked about it. It is said that the gentlemen from the school came early in the morning, and students were strictly prohibited from discussing this matter in each class. Even their Mr. Zai mentioned a few words, and he didn't want them to get involved too much in this matter. He said coldly, this is an adult's business. You are still young, so you don't need to participate too much. If you have free time, you can go to Ji's house to visit your classmates. Although the students in Class A and 3 were very angry at Ying Wenhai who hurt others, they didn't dare to say anything. The county government is also calm. Tang County magistrate put Ying Wengan in prison, neither interrogated him nor sentenced him to punishment, and asked Ying's family to send him bedding and food. But he rejected all the people who came to ask him to go, even the chief history of the palace came, and the county magistrate Tang was not soft or hard. The master of Tang County magistrate couldn't understand it very much, and asked, my lord will not immediately make decisions for the Ji family, nor will you sell the face of the Yizhu palace, so you are not afraid that both sides will be offended? County magistrate Tang said, I've offended you a long time ago, so there's no need to worry about it. I'm an official ordered by the court, and I just need to follow the rules of the court. County magistrate Tang was so tired that he returned to the back house and said to Mrs. Tang, I really regret it. I shouldn't have sought employment in Huiyang County back then. Just like Yang and Shu, it would be nice to find a small county to be the county magistrate. Freedom, within a county, the magistrate is the biggest, who dares to ride on my neck, cough cough what? Mrs. Tang gave him a sideways glance and said, it's not that you dislike the boredom of the small county. Were you proud of yourself for a long time when you snatched the post in Huiyang County before Yang Heshu? Magistrate Tang could only sigh. Mrs. Tang was silent for a moment and asked, do you want to write a letter to father? Magistrate Tang shook his hand, It's just a small case, it's not going to happen. On one side is Ji Xiang, and on the other side is the king of Yizhu. How small is it? A simple and clear case, isn't it small? County Magistrate Tang said. You pack up tomorrow, go to any temple or Taoist temple, take the children out for a while, lest everyone will come to see you in the next 2 days. You are very annoying. Mrs. Tang was still worried. Are you really good? Ji Hao hasn't died yet. Now I'm waiting to see how he's doing. If he's alive, it's easy to talk about. I don't think I'll have to judge him. The Ji family and the Ying family can discuss a charter, Tang County said. Ling said, if he is dead, then it's over. It's useless for me to judge here. The case will have to be sent to the Ministry of Criminal Justice or Dali Temple for another judgment. But the important thing is, how do you judge this first time? Tang County Magistrate said, according to the law. Mrs. Tang said, that's over, both sides have offended. County Magistrate Tang said, it's okay, at worst we pack up and go back to the capital. I also feel that the past 2 years have been a bit aggrieved. Mrs. Tang snorted coldly, I think you are enjoying it. I heard that you stood on the hillside with a little girl and talked for a long time yesterday. What have you said for so long? Let me listen to it too. Magistrate Tang tooted his head and shook his head. The vinegar jar has been turned over again. It's a 12-year-old girl who went into the tent to give Ji Hao an injection to stop the bleeding, so I just asked her about Ji Hao's condition. By the way, I'm not talking to you. Have you ever been? She and her younger brother are Changbo's friends, and Changbo specially entrusted me to take care of them. Yo, now it's not Yang Heshu, but Changbo again. Seeing that she was jealous of Yang Heshu, Magistrate Tang immediately dared not speak. I wish the book friend the royal princess a happy birthday, more and more beautiful, happy every day, and everything goes smoothly. Well, I think the royal princess is more domineering than Shuxiang Menyuan. And, good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 670. Chongyang is on holiday, because DRG didn't come back, so Manbao didn't go to Jishatang. She wanted to discuss the laparotomy with others, but DRG was neither interested nor understood, and thought that these methods of ulcer doctors were not worth learning. The shopkeeper Lao Zhen was worried about DRG, and had no intention of discussing these things. Coupled with the fact that few people came to see a doctor during the festival, Manbao decided not to go to Jishatang. Mr. Zhuang took them to climb high and look far. This time they did not go to Qixia Mountain, but went out of the city. They are with some students from Daji Academy, gentlemen. The gentlemen sat in the 2 carriages in front, and the students sat in the carriage behind. Qiju and Shan Yu jumped out of the carriages when the carriages lined up to leave the city gate, and got into Bai Shan's carriage. The 3 of Bai Shan and the others hated it very much, and shouted, our car can't accommodate so many people, and the horse will be crushed in a while. Zhou Lijun was also in the car. Daji was driving them today. He glanced in, got out of the car silently and walked holding the horse. Shan Yu squeezed into the carriage, and said to Qiju and Bai Er, you guys go to the back. Qiju didn't bother to talk to him, took Bai Shan's hand and said, let's go, let's talk in another place. Bai Shan asked, what must be said at this time? Manbao, that's right, can't we talk about it after getting off the car at the place? When we got out of the car, we have to accompany Mr. at his side. How convenient is it? Qiju pulled him and said, are you going or not? Bai Shan looked at the 2 of them suspiciously, and frowned slightly. Could you want to ask Ji Hao about it? Qiju's eyes lit up, and he nodded again and again. Exactly, exactly. Someone from our academy went to Qixia Mountain to choose horses that day, but it was too chaotic at that time. They didn't know what happened. Ji Hao was really trampled by a horse abdomen. The 4 of Bai Shan, the rumors spread so outrageously. Can you live if you are stepped on by a horse? Man Bao said angrily, don't talk nonsense, if Ji's family and Ying's family hear it, be careful to trouble you. Bai Shandao, Ji Hao is still a member of our school, and the school officials don't allow us to discuss this matter anymore. Bai Erlang pushed them, get out of the carriage quickly, get out of the carriage quickly, our carriage is really about to collapse. Qiju and Shan Yu could only get out of the car regretfully. When they arrived at the place, Mr. Zhuang and the others decided to walk slowly up the mountain by themselves without letting them accompany them, so Qiju and Shan Yu led a group of classmates to surround them. Zhou Lang had just stored the carriage, took a look at this posture, turned his head and asked Daji, what are they going to do? Daji tied up the horse, raised his heels, and said casually, speaking nonsense. Seeing him follow him up, Zhou Lang waved his hand and said goodbye, slow down, and take care of my family Lejun and Manbao by the way. Daji stopped and looked at him, aren't you going to climb the mountain today in Chongyang? Zhou Lang leaned on the carriage and shook his head, I have climbed all the heights in the first 20 years and the next 20 years. Think about it, I used to climb up the mountain and then down the mountain when I went to the county town. I climbed the mountain twice. So don't go, I'll give you the seat. Manbao heard it from the side, and said disgustedly, fourth brother, you are just lazy. Zhou Lejun said, fourth uncle definitely wants to stay in the car to sleep, let's leave it alone, let's go up the mountain quickly, the sun will be too bright to climb after a while. He said again, it just so happens that Uncle Four can look at the carriage, we still have a lot of things in the carriage. Zhou Lang waved his hand and grinned happily, don't worry, I will show you things firmly. Manbao and the others went up the mountain with their own small baskets on their backs. This time, Qiju and the others didn't take anyone with them, so they also carried the book baskets or carried the baskets on their backs. They were embarrassed to crowd Bao and Zhou Lejun, so Bai Shan and Bai Erlang were surrounded and questioned, especially Bai Shan, he is a student of the government school after all, and he is also in the same class as Ji Hao, so he must know a lot of inside information. Bai Shan was so annoyed that he kept slowing down and wanted to wait for Man Bao and the others to come up and walk together, but finally found that it was not possible, so he simply put on his back basket and walked quickly, and started to trot halfway. Qiju and the others also ran to follow, but this was going up the mountain after all, and after a while everyone was out of breath. Bai Shan was panting too, but he was much better than Qiju and the others, mainly because he had been learning some boxing skills from Daji. Even if he couldn't fly to the roof and jump off like him, his physical strength was much better and he was flexible. He looked back at the group of people left behind by him, laughed happily, turned around happily and continued up the mountain, although he no longer trotted, but climbed the mountain at a very fast speed. When Qiju saw it, he couldn't help screaming. He took the lead in chasing him for a while, but when he couldn't catch up, he sat down on the grass or stones by the side of the mountain road, panting. Manbao became happy when he saw it, and he pulled Zhou Lejun and walked up the mountain with their spread hands and feet over them. Bai Erlang followed closely behind, and when the three of them overtook Qiju, they even made faces at him. Qiju thumped the ground angrily, but maybe because he ran too fast just now, his mouth was a little dry, so he could only take a water bag from his book basket to drink water, and when they got up again to chase the four of them met in one place early, leaving them far behind. The four of them looked back at the people who were far behind, laughed loudly, raised their hands and said, "Come and chase us." Manbao put his hand to his mouth and shouted down, "Let's see who climbs to the top of the mountain first." What a fart, how can it be so much worse? Are they not tired after walking so fast? Even though he thought so, Qiju gritted his teeth and climbed up. The gentleman fell far behind. Mr. Zhuang stroked his beard and said with a smile, "The children are very energetic. Mr. Huang and others, your students are running far ahead, so of course they are energetic." A gentleman took the lead and said, Let's go, although we are old, we can't lag behind the children too much. Everyone agreed and climbed up the mountain together. There are quite a few people who come to climb the heights and look far today. On the way, we keep meeting people we know. We greet each other and continue to climb up the mountain. All their stuff is taken by the students, so the gentlemen just need to get themselves to the top of the hill, which is pretty easy. If you are tired, there are pavilions for pedestrians to rest on the road. Even if the pavilions are full of people, you can sit on the stones on the side of the road to rest. Autumn is cool and crisp, the sun is not harsh at this time, but it is warm and pleasant, which is very pleasant. Manbao and the others rested twice before climbing to the top of the mountain. The four of them looked down at the friends below and shouted happily. The depression in the past 2 days dissipated a lot. Sure enough, climbing makes people broad-minded and happy. Chiju was the first to climb up among all his classmates. When he came up, Manbao and the others had already taken up their positions and laid out their things. Next update around 6 p.m.